Today's presentation is about resource planning and management. One of the things that I do as a builder of cost models is look at not just cost, but effort and schedule and scope and see how those things all play together. So this talk is really about some of the issues that we see and some of the ideas that we have for helping people plan their software projects better. So I'll start with a brief introduction, a little bit of like the background behind why this was an important topic for us to think about at Price Systems. Talk a little bit about project planning failures and the fact that you're attending a webinar about resource planning and management means you may have experienced firsthand or have experienced second or third hand some of the issues that go on with software projects. Software projects tend to be different than other kind of projects because of the very nature of software. There's a lot of history in our industry of what we call project failures. I contend that not all failures are necessarily failures in the sense that we might think of them, but certainly software projects tend to have a reputation for being hard to get done on time with the proper amount of quality or the required amount of quality. So I'll talk a little bit about project planning failures and what leads to project planning failures. Talk about what are the components of a good project plan. How can you put together a project plan that is going to help you be successful with your software projects, and talk about some steps to take for improving project planning as well as institutionalizing good project planning. So not just having one or two lucky successes, but really institutionalizing the process and making it something that your organization can do repeatably. So I'd like to start with sort of a historical context. Which of you wishing to construct a tower does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if there is enough for its completion? Otherwise, after laying the foundation and finding him unable to finish the work, the onlookers should laugh at him and say, this one began to build but did not have the resources to finish. And this is, believe it or not, a biblical reference, and I think it's just important to note that long before there was software or electronics of any kind, it was recognized, there is historical basis that project planning is an important aspect. Planning is an important aspect of every project, and projects that aren't properly planned lead to lack of credibility. So from a historical context, it is important for software project managers, particularly because of the reputation that software projects have. It's important for software project managers to develop a process and a plan that's not only going to lead them to success today or in their first project, but it's going to help them get more and more successful with their project planning going forward. So just talk a little bit about some of the evidence out there that project planning for software is hard. In the 2009 Chaos report published by the Standish Group, their evaluation of the data is that only 32% of software projects can be deemed successful. And I've read reports that criticize their definitions of success and challenged and failure. And in some cases, I think that their evaluation is harsh. However, if you look at the percentages, and if you read the paper, and if you read any of the trade rags for the software industry, their numbers might not be on spot, but definitely their findings that many software projects fail to finish, or basically finish late, over budget, or not delivering the requirements that were the original requirement. Excuse me, sorry about that. There's in Computer World in 2007, Paul Michaels reported that approximately, as an estimate of $75 billion in the U.S. per year for rework and abandoned systems. And then Roger Sessions published a white paper in 2009 that moved that number to 1.22 trillion. So there was a constant barrage of doom and gloom in the software project industry. How I like to think about it, because I don't think that every project that is pronounced a failure isn't necessarily a failure in the sense of the word that we think of it. A lot of times what happens with software projects, and if you're interested in this topic, you probably know this, software is unlike anything else in that the possibilities with software are endless, and oftentimes as a software product or project emerges, as the product emerges, the possibilities become visible. It becomes obvious that so much more can be done with this project or with this product, and projects that aren't being managed well let these requirements grow and end up building something that's completely different than the original requirements. And so what I like to think that if in order to deem a project a failure, one should not only look at a complete failure. Anyway, one should not only look at the original plan for the project, but one needs to keep emerging the plan, and as requirements change, as other things change, one needs to keep emerging the plan so that the plan that you're judged against has some basis back to the actual scope that got delivered. Michael, this is the thing we talked about before. My computer just completely froze. Could you please advance to the next slide?
I'm advancing to slide 12.
Thank you. Let me just fumble with my paperwork for 1 minute. So what are some of the reasons for project planning and management failures? Certainly there's organizational failures. Organizations fail to set realistic goals. They fail to understand what what actually, from an organizational perspective, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take to deliver what they need. So there's unrealistic goals being set. There's also a failure to learn from history and to accept reality. I have a colleague who was working on a software project, and the leader of their team, they had lots of meetings planning the project, and what they did was they actually had a seasoned cost estimator do an independent analysis of what the project was going to cost. And I sat in the meeting where this qualified 20 years of experience analyst reported that the project was going to take 10 people 2 years to complete. And the project manager said, and this is not a lie, he stood up and said, well, that's ridiculous. I only have 8 people, and I only have a year to finish this, so that's going to be that's what we're going to do. And of course, 2.5 years later, this gentleman no longer had a job when the project was actually completed. But, you have to be realistic, and you have to look at your history, and you have to listen to the people that are doing the software development, or in this case, the people that understand how to estimate software projects. There's certainly failures in leadership. The project leadership needs to be able to communicate and manage expectations. So, the organization has to accept reasonable plans. The project leadership needs to communicate those plans well, needs to manage expectations as things in the project change so that the organization understands what's going on. And there's also failure sometimes with project participants who, nowadays with agile practices, lots and lots of people are in the lots of people get into the estimation business at different levels of the organization, and there really needs to be a good connection between the organization and the project and the participants from a communication perspective, from an understanding what the requirements are, and all of those things. So all of those things combine together to lead to either project planning if they're done poorly or project success. Could you please advance the slide? What I think is a great tool is what we call the project management